So I will first of all introduce our distinguished speakers that will help us in setting the scene on Lisbon Recognition Convention and Information Provision. We will dialogue today with Luca Lantero, President of the Lisbon Recognition Convention Committee Bureau, with Helene Peterbauer from the European University Association, EUA, Stéphane Lauwick from University of Le Havre, as President of the European Association of Institutions in Higher Education, EURASHE, and Urša Leban from the European Student Union, ESU. So welcome to our panelists. Before starting our dialogue, we would like to start in a dynamic way this panel with a video that was realized in the framework of the project co-funded in the framework of the Erasmus Plus project on the thematic peer group and implementation of the Lisbon Recognition Convention. This video is targeted to students and it aims to give guidelines, we would say golden rules on recognition for applicant to higher education institution. This is the partnership of the project that helped us to develop this video. So let's see the video and enjoy. Thanks a lot. So we start now with our panel discussion. We hope you enjoyed the video, and I remind that this video will be publicly available as an output of the project, together with a leaflet on information provision for students that will be available to all project participants, and we invite you to use these materials for your applicants. So let's start with the panel now. The first question is for Luca Lantero, President of the Lisbon Recognition Convention Committee Bureau. So Luca, welcome. And good morning. And the first question for you is, please, can you explain to us what is information provision in the Lisbon Recognition Convention and why it is so relevant? The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Chiara. Good morning to everyone. I think that I also want to give you some messages in order to explain that instrument. That is the main legal instrument that we have. And even if it's a legal instrument, it's also a great instrument because it's flexible. It was created in 1997, and we saw now that it's very flexible, and so flexible that can answer also to some needs that we have in that COVID crisis as well, because it's very, very flexible in a sense that also with the Lisbon Recognition Convention, we can now recognize qualification also that are awarded with special rules, because the main point is to create the right for a fair recognition, a fair evaluation. So this is the first message. It's an inclusive instrument, because it means that we have to work together with students, with institutions, with ministries, and with all the accreditation agencies, etc. And then the other point that is very important is a transversal. It means that it takes all the part of higher education system. So I would like to thank the colleague from EURASHE, EUA, and ESU to be here with me. And only to briefly inform you that the convention said at Article 3.4 that each party have to provide adequate and clear information on the educational systems. And then on Article 8.1, each party have to provide adequate information on higher education institutions and on their programs. And this is something that we have to do in relation with our institutions. So they are absolutely involved in the implementation of the convention. And of course, the other main point is to create a national information center for each party, to exchange information, not only to inform our national student institution, etc., but to give information among our system and countries. Thank you.
Thanks, Luca. So we move now to the second panelist, to Helene Peterbauer from EUA. So Helene, the question for you is, does the information provision or recognition issues affect attractiveness and visibility of European university globally? In other terms, if we give information or recognition in a transparent, accurate, and complete way for both incoming and outgoing students and graduates, this could be a way to foster attractiveness and competitiveness of a university. Please, the floor is yours.
In short, yes, absolutely, that is the case. Functioning and clear and unmistakable recognition procedures are essentially the backbone of academic mobility and also a founding idea of the European higher education area. And of course, these procedures can only work smoothly if information on them, how they go about, is easily available, accessible, complete, and clearly understandable. So there's no room for interpretation. It's not up to the student or the applicants to interpret what this means. However, this is unfortunately not always the case. And not always recognition procedures themselves are working the way they are supposed to. But what is interesting is when I talk to friends or colleagues who have studied themselves and who are familiar with the Bologna process, but not particularly with recognition issues, they are genuinely surprised that there could potentially be any issues with the implementation of fair recognition procedures. And this is in principle a good signal because it means they have internalized the values of academic mobility within Europe, but also globally. And they have this trust, this intrinsic trust in that academic mobility and recognition and the Bologna process is working. However, when this trust is disappointed, when they do not get information or when they get wrong information, when they're disappointed in the expectations of the qualification being recognized or recognized smoothly, then this can create a disillusionment with the functioning of the European higher education area. And the very basis to counter such a development of disillusionment is information provision. Students or applicants in general need to be informed about their rights. We already have this leaflet that talks about this. They also need to be informed about what they themselves need to do to make their qualification be recognized in a fair way. They need to be informed about what to expect throughout the entire procedure and where and or who to ask for any further information if something is not clear. But this is the student side, but also the universities themselves might need or want support in providing structured information because they may not have the resources to completely overhaul or review the information provision system themselves and might appreciate some guidance based on European level experience and sharing of good practice.
Thanks, Helene. Thanks a lot. And we move now to Stéphane Lauwick. So the question is basically the same for you, but we would like to ask you the point of view of EURASHE. So from your perspective, does the information provision on recognition affect the attractiveness and visibility of professional higher education institutions globally?
Thank you, Chiara. You would be surprised if I said no, I'm sure. But of course, we all know that all this is the question of information, transparency, recognition is much more complex than just visibility. historically, universities and certainly University of Applied Science have been very interested in responding, in reaching out to their communities in order to provide better access. Let's put it that way. But it's taken some time. Why has it taken some time? Well, basically, we have been very busy trying to respond to the combined challenges of massification and, of course, budgetary control. And, of course, that stresses the system quite a lot. What is specific to professional higher education and probably to the applied sciences sector is we have very close links with the world of work, with regional employers, and with local innovators. And so Helene was speaking about trust. Trust is ingrained, is part and parcel of our work every day. Trust with the outside world, the world of work. And strangely enough, that can be an issue because we take it for granted that we trust the members of our ecosystem. But are we good enough at going over and beyond our ecosystem? I'm not quite sure. For example, just one anecdote. In my own institution yesterday, we were checking the admission procedures of one of our programs. It is a very successful program. We have 10 times the number of applicants compared to the number of actual seats in the course. So of course, this is a tremendous issue. This is a tremendous stress. And that means that professors, teachers are, well, perhaps do not open enough. That's one of the points. And really, I liked this little video you showed because it tends to educate the students. What is happening, and I'm really glad that we have a student member here, a member of SU, who's going to tell us about that. How come students do not insist more? Of course, as myself, as a manager of an institution and president of EURASHE, I certainly insist with my colleagues, professors, teachers, other higher education managers. But of course, we need the support of students in this big issue.
Thanks to Stéphane Lauwick for the very concrete and very relevant points. So we move now to students, to hear the voice of students. So we move to Urša, Leban. And Urša, the question for you is, in the report that you usually publish in the view of the Ministerial Conference of the Ministers of the European Higher Education Area, Bologna with Student Ties, information provision on recognition is not mentioned. Can you explain us why? Maybe the students, they can find all the information they need, or the reality is different? Please.
Yeah, unfortunately, hi everyone, also from my side, and good morning. Yeah, unfortunately, the reality is different. That's true. And I would like to thank you very much for this relevant question. Yeah, it's true. It's not really mentioned in the survey that we pass out to our NUSs, but probably because the Bologna with Student Eyes is done in similar way every year, because we need to have data that we can compare between years. And then usually when it was conducted, it was in the first plan. It was conducted to get a student perspective from a national level of the implementation of Bologna process. So from maybe first sight, this is not the first question that we would maybe ask. However, it's a very good thought. And as we did this year, that we contact you when we were revising our recognition part of the survey, I think we will also look into this and see what we can do for the next year. However, here I can maybe emphasize a bit that we do share information with our members, so national unions of students. We held several sessions and workshops on our seminars and conventions, where we do spread information among our NUSs about our collaboration in the peer support group, about also where they can find information. There we always support, not only support, we encourage NUSs to collaborate with NICNARICs, to collaborate with higher education institutions in order to provide information for students. Because we do also acknowledge many times that it's not that maybe students are not confident enough or are not looking, but they simply don't know where to start looking or where the information they would need to look for. So this is still something that we're working on and need to work on a lot. And this leaflet that, yeah, it's the great outcome of this peer support group, I hope is going to help us a bit to develop this direction as well.
Thanks, Urša. And I would like also to recognize the great work that Urša has been personally doing from the European Student Union side for the work on this leaflet, because she was the person working with us on the leaflet. So also thanks for this. The quality is also, we should recognize that was also for your job, for the job that you have been doing. So we now are ready for the second round of questions for our panelists. Before moving again to Luca Lantero, I will just like to remind you that the chat is open. You can comment, ask questions, and we will try to pick up, according to the time, just a few questions for our panelists at the end of this session. Now I move back to Luca Lantero, as president of the Lisbon Recognition Convention Committee Bureau. Luca, can you explain us what are now the next steps of the Lisbon Recognition Convention Committee Bureau? What are the work plan, the next activities, and of the Bureau, and if there is something relevant on information provision that you can share with the participants today?
Thank you, Chiara, for the question. As I said, the Lisbon Recognition Convention is a flexible instrument, but it's also a legal instrument. It means that there are obligations among parties, and the first obligation is to share information on the implementation. And we started the first monitoring report of the implementation of the Lisbon Recognition Convention was drafted and published in 2016. And now the Lisbon Recognition Convention Committee Bureau decided to send another questionnaire to all the parties. So UNESCO and Council of Europe, the two secretariats, are going to send to the parties next week the new questionnaire that we already finalized. And I can anticipate that we concentrate our questionnaire on one main section and one additional section. On the main section, we concentrate our question on 3 topics that are all relevant on information provision. And the first part are related to the right to appeal. We want to be sure that people, students, professionals, institutions, countries know that there is the main right to appeal on recognition procedures and on recognition evaluation. And this is also connected to the reinformation. So the fact that we want to be sure that institutions, ministers, etc., give right information on those kind of procedures. Then there is the second part of the questionnaire related to information provision. So the application and the implementation of Article 3.4, 8.1, and 9.2. It means that we want to know how you implement the National Information Center, the information given to the public on recognition provision procedures and on your higher education system and on your institution, accredited, recognized, and your study program. This is another important and main part, really on information provision. And the third part is related to transnational education. So the implementation of Article 9.9 and 6.5. So how you deal and approach the main world of cross-border education or transnational education in considering the recognition of those qualifications and institutions. Then the questionnaire have another additional part, Why we have another additional part? Because that part is related to two items that are not related, connected to any article of the convention, but are in other other connected text or document or guidelines to the convention. And in that part, we have two other set of questions. One set related to automatic recognition, and this is one of the main topic also within the European higher education area, and the other one on digital solutions. And of course, we know that this is another point very important. As the last information, we are working also to another annex text we call subsidiary text to the convention, so another official text to the convention, Lisbon Recognition Convention, that we will publish in 2022 on digitalization in recognition. So this is a new for you all. There will be an official text on digitalization or recognition in 2 years, published in the framework of the Lisbon Recognition Convention. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Luca, and thanks to all our panelists today, because as you can see, we have the chance to have an insight view on the process and on the main question that we have on the desk today. So we move now to Helene. Helene, we have for you one question. We need to have at least one question on the impact of COVID-19 on higher education and information provision from the university perspective. So our question for you is how universities are responding to COVID-19, especially with regard on recognition and information provision. We can see that there is a need of sharing information, of peer support with colleagues, and I mean also the participation, the number of participants to this meeting today, we can interpret this as a signal of this need. So is there anything that you could share with us from the European University Association perspective?
Well, at the moment, unfortunately, it's still too early to provide systematic or large-scale data. We have not more than anecdotal data because it's still too early to draw any big conclusions or to have any meaningful big-scale data. Not because universities are not interested in recognition issues or because they think that recognition or applications from international students will not be affected by this. They have just focused in the past months just on getting through the semester, on providing good learning and teaching, on providing examinations. Now graduations are a big question. Recognition might be next on the list, but so far they have just not had the time yet to consider this. But we will see how the next months develop. If we're looking a little bit into the future in the next months, years even, one big elephant in the room is, of course, that the dominant prediction for international student mobility in general, is that there will be a drop in international education. Again, we will have to see how the next months, the next year develops. But I've already heard from some ENIGNARI colleagues that they have experienced a drop in applications. This might just be momentary and might pick up again in a few months, but it's already an indication, and it makes sense that students are a little bit wary of going abroad just right now and maybe also in the years to come. What does this mean, or what could this mean? I think it can be seen as a threat or as an opportunity, or both. It is, of course, a threat because it could siphon attention away from important recognition information provision reforms. Why? A drop in international students in combination with all the other challenges that are posed by lockdowns, insecurity about going abroad, could lead to attention being focused in other areas and could result in resources not being provided, or staff simply not having the time, the energy to, for example, invest in staff training on good recognition procedures, or, for example, in an overhaul of universities' information provision system. So this is a threat. But as I said, the situation and the prospects for the months ahead can also be seen as an opportunity. Universities generally want international students, and many of them also need international students. So nobody wants a drop, like a drastic drop in international students. So what could happen is that this might serve as an incentive to review recognition processes and also information provision, because of course it increases the attractiveness of universities or of a higher education system, and also Europe, the European higher education area in general, if there is very easily available, accessible, and clearly understandable information on how to enroll abroad. Another prospective opportunity is that maybe this leads to a move towards automatic recognition and a digitalization of recognition procedures. This could also be part of a broader potential review process.
Thanks a lot, Helene. And we move now to Stéphane Lauwick with another very relevant point, that is the link with employability. So from study and research in the field, it seems that employers look, let's say, take more in consideration competencies rather than formal qualifications. In fact, qualification should be the formal codification of the competencies themselves. So what is your experience on this? How can information provision, if so, how can information provision positively affect the employability of graduates?
Thank you, Helene. Great big question. Yes, that's right. It's also a field of thought that's evolving very fast. And that has, I think that the present crisis has had an impact on that, but I'll come to that later. So obviously, for the professional higher education sector, it's quite obvious that defining awards, diplomas in terms of competencies is the way to go. Why is that so? Well, students have varying ways of learning, and of course, defining our awards in terms of competencies will make it easier for us to adapt to the students' needs. Also, we believe that because students have different ways of learning, it's a good way of adapting to diversity. It's a good way of catering for diversity. In fact, it offers students, a diversity of students, better access to higher education. But let's not get carried over because we are not sure that defining an award in terms of competency is the exact and best recipe for success. It is part of what we have to do to adapt to new conditions and to new students and to open our institutions to new students. But employers do tell us that it is very important for them to have a grasp of the competencies that our students develop, but the knowledge component, pure science, abstract notions are still important. And so it's very interesting that the information provision here comes in full light. Now, what we have to do is making sure that we stress, we highlight, we define the competencies that our students acquire with us. But we need to be extremely precise. We need to spell out all the components of each competence. Now, what is the knowledge part? What is the abstract part? But also, what is the ability part? What is the know-how part? So really, we advocate a very precise way of informing students, of providing transparency tools for the students, of course, but also for employers. And of course, we've been quite good at providing our students with abstraction and pure science. And we should not forget about this. Employers trust us, and that's the question of trust once more. and if programs are defined and explained in terms of competencies, let's make sure that information is complete. And really, I believe that the future of information, the future of recognition, well, lies in more information and more precise information.
Thanks a lot, Stéphane, Lauwick, also for this, also from your side, an insight view, or beyond, I would say, stereotypes a little bit on relation between, let's say, knowledge and academia and employers. Thanks, and we move now for the last question to Urša, and we will try also to keep a few minutes for a very brief Q&A session. So Urša, also to you, we have a question on the impact of COVID-19. We know that of course, students are seriously affected by COVID-19 and that there are quite some concern and the point that you are raising as students. Would you like to share with us what are these concerns and what European Student Union can do on, let's say, raise these points to in the European higher education area?
Yes, as you said, as you already said, students have encountered a lot of different challenges in the past few months, and it has not been easy for many of them. So in regards maybe to the recognition, I know a lot of students are afraid. Of course, the big problem right now is how they're going to finish their obligations to successfully finish their study years. Many students cannot finish their internships, or maybe their lab work for thesis or any other practical work that they were supposed to finish. And of course, there's this feeling of uncertainty going around for students who would like to maybe get these qualifications recognized later, if they're going to be recognized, or if these diplomas or qualifications are going to be seen for example, less valuable or less relevant. So there's a lot of uncertainty and fear. Of course, there's also lacking information about this. One of the things is, of course, that it's still we still don't know what's coming in the next few months. So nobody is really sure how everything is going to look in the next few months. And of course, international students, that's another problematic area, because a lot of students have either been stuck somewhere or they needed to leave early home and couldn't continue their education. Maybe their courses have been finished or just canceled. And yeah, so there are a lot of problems. So what else we can do? We already had hosted some webinars on different topics. One of those webinars was also about recognition, where we also invited different guests from our stakeholders from this area, so students could directly ask questions. We are also working, of course, with our NUSs. A lot of them have been doing a lot of lobbying in order to provide or to secure the quality of education on national level, to secure that also e-learning and all different ways of learning that are nowadays the normal learning, that are still quality. And of course, also one of the things that was also mentioned here many times is this communication and collaboration between higher education institutions and economics and students. I think this is something that is still going to be very important in the next few months, when students, either international or host students, are going to will want to continue their educational path. Of course, one thing that ESO sees as most important is that we are like giving clear guidance to students, so they do know where to find information, that they do know what is happening and how is this going to happen. That we also advocate for flexibility and for personal approach, so that we look at every student personally. And of course, one thing I think that is quite important, and I said it also before, to understand and just to accept that learning outcomes can be obtained in different ways, so that students don't feel this risk of maybe their diplomas are not going to be valuable, or that that learning outcomes are just not going to be recognized in the next processes. sorry, one more thing. One important thing that I forgot to mention is of course, digitalization of the process. I think this is maybe the good thing in this whole bad situation, that we were forced to move online. And in part, like looking at the recognition, I think this is also one maybe positive thing. So maybe some procedures now can be done in digital ways, and this can of course makes everything easier for students.
So thanks, Urša. Thanks also for raising the point of digitalization that is very relevant. So thanks to all our panelists. We have a few minutes for picking up a few questions. There are quite very interesting questions and very interesting, very relevant point on the chat. I will start with the point on recognition, validation of qualifications of formal and not formal qualification. I see that there is also there is already an answer from Jean-Philippe Restoyer of the Council of Europe. I will ask to Luca if you can say very brief, just few points on this.
Yes, thank you, Chiara. This was one of the points that we discussed within the Bureau, of course, but we decided not to have during this term, during that work plan, that discussion. Also because you have to understand that within the Lisbon Recognition Convention, as Jean-Philippe said, there is no any mention on non-recognition on non-formal and informal qualification. There is an article 4.8 on the part of recognition of qualification giving access to higher education on recognition of non-traditional qualification. This is the term that is used by the Lisbon Recognition Convention. But of course, in other document annexes to the convention, we spoke a lot about that point. We decide to concentrate our work right now to automatic recognition and digitalization and to other issue that I explained. But we put that point for the next work plan because we have a great discussion on that. But I want to give you another point. I think that, and someone spoke about micro-credential, also for that point, for other recognition challenges, of course, we have to be ready to find different ways and to be flexible to recognize those kind of different paths. And I think that another point related to micro-credential will be on the top of the agenda of the ENIC-NARIC centers and on the recognition world in general. Thank you.
Thanks, Luca, and to Urša and Helene, from the perspective of university and of students, there is a point on, there is a question, don't you think students and institutions need not only a leaflet about recognition, but a guide? So we know that there are actually quite a lot of initiatives. I can quote the third edition of the year of the European recognition manual for higher education institution, but I will, if you can very briefly, maybe I will give the floor first to Urša and then to Helene. Very briefly, if you can say something on this. Please, Urša.
Yes, I very much agree. Like the lack of collaboration is there, and of course we need a lot of guidance how to collaborate, in which ways, like what are the areas that are lacking right now. But I think a leaflet is a good start, at least. So right now we have something that we can share among our NUSs, they can share among the students. So this is a good start where we can make a first step. And of course, any bigger step in this direction would be great. So I think this is still like an area that we can explore in the future, of course.
Thanks, Urša. Helene?
I can only agree with Urša. A leaflet is a first step and a first important step at the European, overarching level. Imagine you're a student and you are interested in enrolling in a particular international university with your qualification, and you have to work your way through 20 pages of explanations first. And then you still have to find specific information for the particular institution you're interested in. I think it makes sense that for this very first information, access to overall information to your rights and what awaits you in general, a leaflet is sufficient. And this should then, give you a good basis to approach the particular institution and get more information there. And then it is the job of the university to prepare this information and give it to you in a digestible format, but also detailed enough as the ECTS guide is.
Thank you, and thanks, Helene. And there is a question from Hamad Jamal from the Office of Lebanese Prime Minister. So I just briefly comment on this. He asked about the need for a recognition supplement as diploma supplement to identify the major recognition of qualification. So just to answer on this, that this was a topic of discussion in the work of the thematic peer group beyond recognition. We've been discussing if it's possible to set up a template for this. So we've been discussing about possible template, a kind of, let's say, European assessment report. And we also, there is also an interesting publication of the Dutch Eniknerk Center, NAFIC, on portability of recognition decision. We will post this link in the chat box in a moment. But I would like to conclude the panel with a question from Jean-Philippe for Stéphane Lauwick. Actually, there are two questions for Stéphane Lauwick. Maybe we manage to take one. And I will pick up, Stéphane, if you agree. You can choose, but I will.
Yeah, thank you, Chiara, and thank you very much, Jean-Philippe. Of course, you are asking the two main questions, and I was expecting this, and thank you very much for going that way. You remember I was saying we're not good enough. We have to say that we're not good enough. The truth is, how have we been able to move forward on the issue of recognition and information? Well, I think we've been able to move forward thanks to two crises. The first one, you wouldn't be surprised, is of course the migrant crisis, and all those educated men and women coming to our shores without documentations, and how do we inform them, recognize their qualifications, and of course universities have been very sensitive to this point and have worked tremendously on those issues. The second one is, of course, the COVID-19 crisis. And that has also been instrumental in making us recognizing that we just didn't do enough, not only for those people from Africa or Syria, but for our own people. And COVID-19, with the closure of universities and the lockdown, has shown us that there are many ways of learning, and these new ways of learning we have to be able to recognize in a light, autonomous process that we have to define, and certainly we have to talk about and we have to defend. But I need to have an anecdote here once again. One of our associate members is Perul University in India. And those people, when they locked down, they identified a wealth of learning opportunities outside the universities. Now, company, business webinars, citizen projects, students going into voluntary work. And they were able to recognize that those are fantastic learning opportunities, and those should be quality assured. Those should be given quality tools, or we should adapt our quality tools to those learning opportunities. How do you inform the students on their rights for this? How do you recognize what they have learned is a tremendous point. Now, that has led us to highlight the question of how do you quality assure, recognize, inform those bits of learning opportunity. And that's really what micro-credentials are all about. Now, they can be formal or not formal, non-formal, but they certainly do exist. More than that, they're not only restricted to migrants or to people affected by the COVID crisis. They are an absolute need if we want to train, to retrain, to upskill our workforce in those difficult times. And therefore, we've been very busy working on micro-credentials. I'm pleased to report that the Commission, the European Commission, is going to publish a draft paper in the coming days. We've been instrumental in working on that. And this draft paper is going to be open for discussion. And may I encourage everybody here to concentrate on this question of micro-credentials, because there is the future for our flexibility and really meeting the needs of the whole population who needs such an amount of retraining and upskilling.
Thanks a lot to Stéphane Lauwick, thanks to Urša, thanks to Helene, and thanks to Luca, thanks to all our distinguished panelists for the quality of the content raised, and also to participants for also the relevant of point for discussion. Thanks again, and I pass over the floor to Helene that will introduce the next item. Thanks again.
Thank you very much, Chiara, and our four panelists for sparking off the reflection really in such a lively and interesting way, and different stakeholders giving an insight on information provision beyond stereotypes, like you mentioned, Chiara, and also many common views and objectives, and also this this view that with the COVID-19 crisis, there is also an opportunity to move forward with recognition of different styles of learning. So thank you very much to all of you.